Okay, sorry. So, the title is Are Force in Action Natural Action? Just a few words about what I won't say. First of all, I won't deal with the problem of naturalness in general, because simply because I have something to say, but it's a totally different topic. But I will try to keep the idea of naturalness as intuitive and as vague as possible, but you will see in the end what I mean more or less by naturalness. In a slogan, we could say that natural is when you have a theory, you have a piece of a theory, you want to say that something is natural when it fits with some background idea of the theory. How this works is not clear, and it should be kept vague, but we will see. And also, force in actions, I won't enter really in details of the force in action because they are very technical. And, but it should be kept in mind that if you want to have a clear understanding of the problem, you have to see how this action works in the practice of set theory. Because any kind of justification you can find is kind of partial. So maybe force in action as natural action is not the right title, but let's start. So the general setting of the problem is the following. We have the phenomenon of incompleteness, and we want to give a convincing solution to open problems like the continuum hypothesis, or problems that we want, for which we feel that there should be a clear answer. So the general setting of the problem is the following. This quotation of Giorgio that is very known. This axiom show clearly not only that axiomatic system of set theory is known today is incomplete, but also that it can be supplemented with the arbitrariness by new axioms, which are only the natural continuation of this setup so far.
These results show clearly in the report, I think, in the original report.
No, I think it was talking about large cardinal axioms. So I'm not sure, but it was talking about malus, cardinals, and so on. So the implicit idea, we will come back on this, is that if we want to complete the axiom of set theory, we should keep in mind its foundational aim, and so the completion of set theory is really a way to solve problems in mathematics. But so what without arbitrariness mean? Or in other words, when we can say that an axiom is natural? Of course, as I said, I won't say what naturalness is in general, but we can see from the previous quotation that the problem of justification of axiom and the problem of naturalness are linked since the beginning. But also in a concrete example, again, Gödel says that the axiom of constructibility could seem to be a natural completion of the axiom of set theory. So a natural axiom is something that we would like to add to our system for some reason that are not so clear, but we will try to see which are these reasons. So what are the criteria for new axiom? As we just seen with Claudia, we have intrinsic reason and extrinsic reason. So the intrinsic reason, I will repeat it, are reason whose justification stems from the concept of set itself. We have an idea of set shaped in the cumulative hierarchy, and we want to justify an axiom with respect to this idea. And extrinsic reasons are what is normally called success of an axiom. So if you want to justify, I mean, there are many other forms of justification of axiom, for example, maximality, fairness, as Bagheria has proposed also, But this reason, and I mean, this is not reason, this is form of justification. So it's a more general context where to pose the problem. But the point is that if we want to justify an axiom, we should make sense of this distinction, or at least understand what is an intrinsic reason. But so the idea is that what I will try to explain now is that it's very hard to make sense of this distinction, and also in particular, it's very hard to make sense of what is intrinsic reason, because as we already saw, I mean, what could be intrinsic can change from person to person. For example, for Claudio, the axiom of the EMH was very intrinsic, while for Luca it's clearly not, because large cardinals seems to be intrinsically justified. So our question now is the following. When does an axiom is intrinsically justified? I will try to show that it's not clear either from a theoretical point of view, but also from a practical. We will see an example of the justification of an axiom where it's not so clear where the intrinsic justification ends and the extrinsic begins. So, but how to match axiom and concept? I mean, we have a syntactic notion and some concept. So, the idea is that, in some sense, an axiom should describe, I mean, not the axiom, but the conceptual content of an axiom should describe some meaning of a concept. So let's try to ask our question again in a more, always in a more concrete sense. Our question is now, when does an axiom is able to capture part or completely the meaning of a mathematical concept? So if we want to say that an axiom is intrinsically justified, we should appeal to something like this.
What the meaning of a concept?
Of course, I don't know. This is a problem.
Meaning of what?
Huh?
Meaning of the concept?
The meaning of the concept, well, is in some sense is the essence of the concept. The problem is, I agree that, I mean, it's not so clear what is really the meaning of the concept. But the only attempt to understand this matching between axiom and concept can be found in Boulos when he tries to justify ZFC axioms. And Boulos says it seems probable, nevertheless, that whatever justification for accepting the axiom of extensionality there may be, it is more likely to resemble the justification for accepting most of the classical examples of analytic sentences, such as all bachelors are unmarried. Then it's a justification for accepting the other axiom of set theory. So when an axiom seems to be intrinsically justified, in some sense it has an analytical, it's analytic in the concept they are trying to describe. So this brings us to a comparison between intrinsic and intrinsic reason and analytic and synthetic sentences. That, of course, brings also a lot of philosophical problems. I mean, there's no much time to go into details, but what I'm trying to say here is that, disregarding your philosophical position, if you want to understand what is intrinsic reason for accepting an axiom, you are approaching the concept of analyticism. And so, from a Platonistic point of view, we can see that one of the more detailed attempt to make sense of this meaning was by Gödel, and he said that there is an intuition of the concept of set that, and so some axiom force upon us so strongly that we are willing to accept them. So we have an immediate perception of the truth of something, exactly as we have when we see that something is in some sense tautological. And the tautology is exactly also from a formalist point of view the kind of approach we have with intrinsic justification of axiom. Because if we think that axiom define the concept as, for example, Hilbert thought, then intrinsic justification are just the tautological way to say exactly what axiom are formalizing. So the idea is that when we are referring to intrinsic extrinsic justification for axiom, we are entering a very we are entering many philosophical problems that also explain how difficult is this job for a mathematician. So the problem of justification of the axiom, this is my intuition in this context, is not only a mathematical problem, but it gets to the more fundamental problems of the philosophy of mathematics. And either we try to solve the problem that Quine posed, or we make sense of Gödel intuition, or it's very difficult to say that an axiom is intrinsically justified. So I don't want to face these problems directly, but just point at the difficulties we have in doing this job, this mathematical job that is really a philosophical job. So, but also from a philosophical point of view, we could ask what are the philosophical presuppositions of such a distinction. And again, we see that even if we believe that the position is not so real, even if we are not willing to accept Hamkin's multiverse and his Platonism, where everything exists, the idea of intrinsic and extrinsic reason really hide a philosophical realism that is very strong. In the sense that intrinsic reason, of course, they presuppose the staticity of the concept. There is a concept we can describe, so axiom really describe a reality, maybe not ontologically stable, but still conceptually. But also in extrinsic reason presupposes similarity between set theory and natural sciences, because we have consequences that confirm the hypothesis that in some sense are theorems we are using. So the idea is that this distinction really presupposes a philosophy behind that is realism. So this was just to clear the stage, because my idea is that it's not a useful dichotomy that we can use in justifying axiom. So, but also from a practical point of view, it's hard to see what is intrinsic and what is extrinsic. So, for example, Claudio said rightly that normally ZFC axioms are just considered as implicit, as intrinsically justified. And this is what everybody who's trying to extend them is doing, of course. But we can see from this couple of quotations that the matter is not so clear, because Penelope Mehdi, for example, says, I will start with the well-known axiom of Zermelo Fraenkel set theory. Not so much because I have everything particularly new to say about them, but more because I want to counteract the impression that this axiom enjoys preferred epistemological status, not shared by inaxiom candidates. So, also at the level of CFC is not so clear that they are so intrinsic. But Boulos itself, in the same article where he says that the axiom of extensionality is kind of analytical in the meaning, in the concept of set, says that, for example, the axiom of placement is not so clear that it's intrinsically justified. So here is a practical example where the intrinsic and extrinsic justification play both a role in the justification of an axiom. For example, the axiom of determinacy that was quoted also by Claudio before, this is the axiom. It says that for every subset of the Baire space, where we have the Baire space is just the infinite sequence of natural numbers, where we can just, me and another player, we just play natural numbers, and in the end, I win if I manage to construct a sequence that is in the set we choose, otherwise the other win. So the axiom says there is a strategy for either one player or the other. This seems very innocent as an axiom, but it has tremendous consequences on set theory. But the point is that it's incompatible with the axiom of choice. So people were willing to accept this axiom because it has so many consequences that the extrinsic justification for it were so strong. But then there was an intrinsic justification that we cannot leave the axiom of choice because it is intrinsically justified as an axiom of CFC, even if it's not so clear that it's so intrinsically justified as we've just seen. So here we have an axiom that is very powerful, but for which we devise a slight variant just not to lose what we have, because we have other reasons to accept. So what are a natural axiom? This was the question in the beginning. So what are natural axiom? The answer, I tried to show that the answer is not in the intrinsic extrinsic justification, but I believe that it can be found in the history of set theory. Exactly when we ask when an axiom is natural, we should ask for what, how, in which context. And the idea is that I'm proposing is that we should look at why set theory was created, which were the ideas that motivated this theory, and respect these ideas, then we can say that an axiom is natural. So Pereiros in this article says that a depiction of set theory as a theory with no substantial antecedents seems suitable for the meta-theoretic period that set theory as it lived from about 1950, but not for the more properly theoretical and axiomatic period that anteceded 1940. It was in these years that the current of understanding was gain of set theory, its axiomatic underpinning, the universe V, basically a matter of understanding and clarifying the concept of number and function. I mean, this is the general context, but in particular, the idea of this article is to explain that the motivating idea behind set theory were to be found in the attempt to make axiomatic, formally treatable, the idea of arbitrary sets. And the idea that was behind it was the so-called quasi-combinatorial conception of function and sets. Arbitrary set is, the idea of arbitrary set is the idea that we have, by Cantor theorem, for example, uncountably many subset of the natural number, the natural numbers, but our language is countable. So even if we use all the resources of the language, there will always be subset of the natural numbers that will never be describable by our language. They will always be arbitrary in some sense. So the quasi-combinatorial conception has been called in this way by Bernays in this article on Platonism. And he says, but analysis reflects Platonism to a stronger degree with respect to the following notion: set of numbers, sequence of numbers, and function. It abstracts from the possibility of giving definition of sets, sequences, and function. These notions are used in a quasi-combinatorial sense, by which I mean in the sense of an analogy of the infinite to the finite. In the same way, one uses a set of integers as the result of infinitely many independent acts of deciding for each number, whether it should be included or excluded. From this point of view, constructive definition of specific functions, sequences, and set are only ways to pick out an object which exists independently of and prior to the construction. And on this basis, Bernays also justifies the axiom of choice in set theory. So the main question that we could formulate about forcing axiom is now the following. Following this suggestion to look at history, we have two questions in particular. The first one is the notion of arbitrary set necessary for an intuitive motivation of forcing axiom. And the second one, to what extent forcing axiom captured and sharpened this idea. So the idea also behind the formalization of this justification of axiom is that the axiomatization really aims at understanding, clarifying, and capturing some idea that motivate the development of a theory. And in particular, they try to make formally treatable the notion of arbitrary set. So we see again that the foundational aspect of set theory, the foundational aspect of set theory in the sense that set theory is a foundation, could be the foundation of mathematics, really interact in the foundation of set theory as a mathematical theory. Quanto ancora?
7 minutes.
Okay. So it's now time to say what forcing axioms are, at least to give some definition or an idea in 7 minutes. So, what is forcing? I'm the third person who is explaining what is forcing, or maybe the fourth. So we have a model of set theory, a countable transitive model. For many good reasons, we use countable transitive model, and that we call the ground model. And the method of forcing is a method that allows us to construct a new model that is called a generic extension. Extensional because it includes the ground model, but it's just fatter and not higher in the sense that the ordinals are the same, and it really has something new. There is a new set that is called G, the generic set, that belongs to the generic extension, but not to the ground model. And we can justify the existence of such a countable transitive model, because we cannot prove it by second incompleteness theorem, by a kind of incorrect use of Leibniz's column argument. Also, the fact that it's incorrect is because V is not a set, so we cannot use Leibniz's column to a proper plot. So, in particular, how this works. We have the ground model, our countable transitive model. We have partial order. Thanks to this order, we can control the truth in the outer model, the generic extension. And we have, I'm just explain you this just to make sense of the form of forcing axiom of the sentence, of the definition of forcing axiom, but I'm not, I know that it's impossible to understand how this works, but just to say that it's a method that works with a model, a partial order, and a collection of dense sets in the partial order. And thanks to these three objects, the method of forcing generate a new object that actually intersect. It's the new object is a subset of our partial order that intersect every dense set that belongs to the model. And then we generate the generic extension exactly as we have the algebraic closure of a field. We have a new symbol, and we generate all the things that we can generate by means of this symbol. So the main theorem of Cohen is that exactly this method that I just described works. This is the idea, and this is a theorem. So if you have a model, a poset, then there is a, and if the model is countable, then there is this filter that intersects with dense sets. So if we have a countable model, this countable model can see just countable many subsets of the natural numbers. And so if ZFC is consistent, the method of forcing allows us to see other subsets of the natural numbers that in this way become in some sense definable with respect to the generic filter we are just adding. So this is the definition of forcing action. Just two slides were just to give you this definition. Because if in Cohen theorem we ask for Aleph-1 many dense sets, we cannot prove the theorem, and so we need an axiom to state that this is possible. And this is exactly what our forcing axiom. This says if we have a partial order that belongs to some, we have some property, and a collection of Aleph-1 many dense subset of this partial order, then there is a generic filter, there is a G that intersect every dense set. So there's no reference to model in the forcing axiom, but the idea is that if a model satisfies such an axiom, in some sense, all the forcing extension that we could do by means of this poset has been already done. So, about natural forcing axioms. So the first question was, is the notion of arbitrary set necessary for an intuitive motivation of forcing axioms? Well, my answer is yes, because presuppose the idea that the model of size Aleph0 or Aleph1 does not completely capture all the subsets of, for example, omega. So if we can extend with new generic elements that were not definable before, but are not definable in some sense. And this brings us to the question, to the second, to the answer to the second question: to what extent forcing action capture and shape this idea? We can say that some of the arbitrary set become definable in the generic extension, and so in some sense, it makes the notion of arbitrary more treatable. So, but do they really capture the idea? Well, in some sense, yes. In some sense, no. The sense in which the answer is yes is because actually forcing axiom says that we have Aleph2 many subset of the natural or subset of Aleph1. So in some sense, even if there are arbitrary many, we know how many they are. But the problem is that even if we have a model where these axioms are true, we can still force, and this brings you to the philosophical question in the end, we can still force from this model to add subset of the natural number or subset of omega-1, so that in the end there could be still some other subset. So the idea of arbitrary set is not completely captured by this axiom. And also the historical question that would be interesting to ask in this setting of the problem is if we look at history, where the place to ask for the justification of an axiom, can we see different justification if we look at the work of different people? For example, I believe that if we, but I don't have time to specify this, that Zermelian set theory can justify much better the idea of arbitrary set and so on, forcing axiom, than Cantorian set theory. So, but this is for future work. So, thank you.
Okay, questions? Neil?
Thanks, Giorgio. I really enjoyed that. Really interesting stuff. Just a quick one on a possible case study. So I took it that one of the things you were saying was that there's not really a good distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic justification. I think some way you might go and look at that is precisely something that popped up in Claudia's talk, which is this notion of maximality. I mean, some people take it as, you know, intrinsically we should think that the universe of sets is in some sense as big as possible, as wide, tall, whatever. But on the other hand, it seems to be very much an extrinsic justification. It's kind of aesthetically pleasing. It provides us with, I think Maddie says things like, it provides us with the maximum number of isomorphism types. So that might just be a nice direction for you to look at that distinction and try and argue that really, yeah, it is quite a blurred one.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the idea of maximality is very, very small field. So because if you think about the logical complexity of the continuum hypothesis is, if CH is true, there are new sets that are new bijections between omega and omega-1. If it's false, there are new sets, there are new reals. So, I mean, maximality is also, I mean, it has the same problem. You have to choose since the beginning what you are really maximizing. So, if you don't have a notion of relevance or what really interests you in posing maximality, it's an empty notion.
Less a point about maximality in itself, and more using maximality to highlight intrinsic versus extrinsic justification. Why really, you know, what is intrinsic to one person is extrinsic to another.
Exactly.
Okay, so next is Claudia.
I did what I said I would have done.
So thanks for mentioning my talk a couple of times. I was going to say, would it be more reasonable to say that the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic has still some value, but that we are not able in principle to say whether intrinsic reasons count more than extrinsic reasons for the acceptance of an axiom? So can we keep the situation, the alternative between the two, as, can we say that it's still clear in a sense, but it's less clear whether we are committed to using one of the two, and in what sense and in what circumstances with the acceptance of an axiom? It would be a sort of good compromise for...
Well, it would be a nice compromise. I mean, I mean by saying that there's no clear distinction between the two, that the notion is not so innocent as it seems to be, in the sense that it's very hard to make reference to a concept you are trying to shape with your action. So, and this may problem in the process of justification, in the sense that you are justifying something because you want really something. So, exactly when you, I mean, also a historical example goes in this direction. I mean, Woodin convinced the community of, say, theory that CH was true at some point. Then he changed his mind and convinced everybody with intrinsic reason that CH was false. But now it seems to be true in his, and it has kind of intrinsic reason. So I'm not saying there are not good reasons. I'm just saying that intrinsic, when you say intrinsic making reference to a concept, to something like this, is not so clear what the concept is outside what you're saying about it.
So, what was next?
Okay, so short question. It's possible you already answer me. I don't know. In your general account of naturalness and mathematics, that for some coincidence is pretty close to mine, normative components are very important in the sense that whenever one labels a mathematical object as natural, it is not possible to ground all of this process just on some inherent part of the object or in the play or just referring to the kind of relation that this object establishes with some other objects. So something more is needed, and what we try to show is that this kind of thing is somehow normative. So what I want to know is where do you think that this kind of normativity comes in with respect to forcing axioms?
Good question. I have to think about it, where the normativity aspect comes. But I think that, I mean, if you interpret forcing as a method of definition of new objects, even if normally it's not considered as such, but if you believe that if you can force something, you are really defining something new, well, then maybe there is a normative aspect of the axiom.
Okay, so are there any further questions? We have time for just one, very quick. That's right, okay, so let's thank our speaker. Okay.